Hello and welcome to Bookstr Talks. Today I'm joined by thriller author Burt Weissbourd and the voice behind all of his audiobooks, Marnie Young. Thank you both so much for joining me. I'm going to ask you both a couple of questions on my end, but anybody watching, please do leave your own questions down in the comments and we'll get to them next. How are you both today?
Great.
Good. Thank you for
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both for joining us. So I guess a good way for us to kind of start off would be to ask how much of turning a book into an audiobook is a collaboration between author and voice actor?
Well, Burt, do you want to start? Or you want?
I'll start. I mean, I think
Sure.
it varies with each audiobook, but in our case, Marnie was such a great collaborator that it was very much fun to be able to talk about the characters, to talk about specific interpretations of sections in the book. And I think that it made for a better audiobook and certainly made for a better interpretation of the book that Marnie was narrating.
Yeah, I mean, it can vary, the level of collaboration, but with Burt, it was wonderful because we had some phone conversations about different characters, and as an actor, to get sort of that inside perspective or whatever is exciting, and it's gold for us, because then we just have a real sense of exactly who these people are, or this woman in particular, like the main characters. So when you're moving forward, you have a very clear picture of the vision of what she should be. And I remember asking him, like, what's the most important thing that you want to come through? And it was just a nice back and forth that we had a few times about different characters. Which I really enjoyed, because you don't always get that. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, just do your thing. And you're like, okay, which is fine, all fine. But it was lovely to be able to have these conversations, especially too with his background of, being a former producer, and just sort of his take on what he was seeing in these wonderful visuals. Because I'm that's how I learn. Visual is very important for me. So to be able to sort of draw that out was so helpful for me in the process.
I would just add that, we did 4 audiobooks together and 3 were a trilogy, so that the conversations on the 3 with the same characters just evolved in a very nice way. That was very helpful.
Completely agreed. Yeah.
And so with these conversations where you're kind of working through the books and trying to figure out how to adapt them best, do you find yourself kind of testing out character voices or intonations before deciding on which one you're going to go with? I guess, Marnie, you could start. Do you bounce your voices off of Burt?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have what's called a first 15, which is this lovely little, and it doesn't have to be just the first 15 minutes of the book. It can be, different passages, whatever. It's basically includes all the main character voices. And that way, when the author gets it back, in this case, Burt's able to hear all the main character voices, the tone, the rhythm, the pacing, sort of the general take on the book, and then offer feedback, which is, it worked beautifully, because there was a French guy in danger in plain sight, Danielle, and I wasn't quite hitting the mark with what he was looking for, and it was wonderful because instead of me saying, hey, how about this, how about this, how about this, how about this, he was like, actually, here's what I'm looking for, and gave me some YouTube links. And it was so helpful, because I just listened again and again and again and again. And sort of, I'm not a mimic, so I can't copy that exactly, but to give an essence of what he had sent. And he ended up, in the end, being very happy with that. So that's sort of, yeah, it's bouncing off, but it's not like, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's you sort of say, here's all the main voices. What do you think?
No, I sent Yves Montand, I think that's who I sent, the French actor.
Yes.
You sounded just like him. It was great.
For Burt, do you have these, just kind of going off of that, do you have any voices in mind as you're writing the characters? Do you find when you're writing dialogue, are there voices coming to you that you were then able to realize through Marnie?
That's a good question. You know, I really don't. Excuse me.
You're in high demand this evening.
I really don't when I'm writing, but it's one of the great things about doing an audiobook is that suddenly you do hear them and you hear things you didn't expect. And oftentimes they're better than what you wrote. And we can really then talk about that and add things to it. I mean, when Marnie talks about the 15 minutes that she sends at the beginning, that's invaluable because then you really hear what it's going to be like and you're able to sort of go back and forth about what's working and what isn't and what you want to improve on and what you want to just leave alone.
And for you, Marnie, how did you end up here? How did you get into voice acting?
Well, I've been a stage actor for since I was like in first grade. I think I was a Care Bear. I think it was in kindergarten or something, and then it just kind of progressed from there. I got my master's at Yale, and I had an agent. I was very fortunate. I had an agent, a legit agent, commercial agent. Anyway, as soon as I broke into television, I found out I was pregnant with twins. So, and it was sort of changed the trajectory of my career path. And a friend of mine had said, you should try audiobooks. You have a nice voice. You should look into it. You can stay at home. You can be with your kids, still make money, do something you love, right? So that kind of was it. I'm the kind of person that takes the ball and just like runs with it, and that's how I ended up here.
And what do you both think is the biggest challenge in bringing the characters to life via audio? Burt, if you'd like to start.
Well, I think it's being able to try new things and see what works. I mean, you really don't, when I'm writing, you really don't picture what people sound like. You picture the way they talk, the words, but it's not the sound. And when I would first hear these people, sometimes it adds some depth to the character. And so that I really looked forward to it. And Marnie would sometimes, try different things. And then you could really sort of see what the choices were. And that worked out wonderfully well for me.
And for Marnie, what do you think the kind of biggest challenge is in doing what you do?
I would say, you don't have so I'm used to acting on stage. You have a director. The director is telling you, you're over here, you're over there. You know, as an actor, you need to learn your arc, your objectives, all that stuff. But you've also got a guiding hand throughout. You are your guiding hand in this case. So it's trusting those instincts and trusting that training, just sort of everything that you have. But yes, you're not inside the author's head. And obviously my job is to align what I am doing as close to Burt's vision as possible. And since I'm not in his head, I have to just trust that, my own direction and what I'm bringing to it is what he wants. And then that's, again, where the collaboration comes in, because he's like, oh yeah, that's working there, that's working there. Not so much maybe here, let's try this instead. So I guess in a way he is a little bit of a director, but for the most part, you're directing yourself. And I would think that's the biggest challenge for me.
And so with this collaboration and with this process, would either of you ever like to swap and try the other person's art form?
No. No way. I like to read what's on a page. No, thank you.
What about you, Burt?
I'll tell an embarrassing story. I did the audiobook for Inside Passage years ago, and I completely failed. And,
oh no!
And I enjoyed it. It's fun to read your own book, but it's not the same thing as listening to someone else do it. And I would never want to do it again.
So there's no audio collab coming up then. That's a shame. And so, Marnie, which has been your favorite book by Burt to narrate? And I have a follow-up question for Burt, and I want to know if it's the same one that it was for him to write. Do your favorites overlap here?
Ooh, okay, maybe I'm taking the easy way out, but I love that he wrote a trilogy. I mean, how could you not? You know, it's like when you're watching a series and you just binge the series because you just want to see more and more. You want to see how these characters develop and the dynamics change and evolve. And I love doing the Corey Logan series. So Inside Passage, Teaser, and Minos. I loved being able to do that trilogy, the depth that you get into, because there are additional books. You know, when you're restricted to one book, you may have a 36-hour story in your mind, but you know, all you get is that, well, to read it, whatever, 8 hours. But I know that's probably taking the easy way out, but that's what I think of.
And Burt, was the trilogy your favorite to write, or do you have another that you think was your favorite one to work on?
My answer to this is always, it's like asking which is my favorite child. And it's impossible to answer that. But it is true that the trilogy has a real special place in my heart, because you do get to work on the same characters over 3 books. It's just a lot more time thinking about them, developing them, trying things. And I really enjoy doing that. And that's, you know, really worked out with Marnie reading them.
And so I have one final question before I turn over to some of our audience. Marnie, as someone who acts too, how does voice acting, you know, differ for you from more traditional acting forms like stage or television? Does it at all, do you think?
You know, I'm probably going to get slapped by all the purists, all the audiobook friends out there. I'm going to get horrible emails like, what are you doing? To me, it's not that much. I mean, really, because I feel like it's just what I would do on stage, except to myself, and, you know, in a dark room with not much light. And because, you know, you're still pursuing something, you still are focusing on relationships, you're still fleshing out characters, you're still, you know, you're thinking about how do these people walk, how do these people move through this space, you know, and sometimes you're hearing a voice in your head and you're trying out different, in the same way that you would as you would attack a script on stage, or, you know, on a script in a film. So I would say not a lot, because, you know, even with the technical aspect of, oh, well, I can't scream like I could on stage, or I can't, you know, I have to, so technically there are certain things I have to think about. I have to keep my head here, so that the sound doesn't, but then even on stage, you have to project, or you have to, if you're turned slightly, you still have to make it natural, and you have to, you know, so I'm probably, like I said, I'm probably going to get punched for this, but I don't really think it's that different.
And Burt, having seen so many actors as well, you know, on set in your own time in Hollywood, do you think there's a big difference, or would you agree with Marnie?
I do agree with Marnie.
And so I do have a comment here before I get to some questions. Lisa says, Marnie, you do have a great voice.
Oh,
so there you go.
Thank you.
So I've got a question here from Sam, who asked, Burt, what was the first book or piece that you ever wrote? And Marnie, what was the first book you narrated or voiced? So Burt, if you want to go first there?
The first book that I wrote, is that the question?
First book or piece that you ever wrote. So you can interpret that as you will.
I wrote some screenplays before I wrote a book. And I actually wrote the screenplay that became the first book, which was Inside Passage. And that was the Corey Logan was the name of the screenplay. And from the screenplay, I developed the book. And the book is quite different than the screenplay, but that was my first experience writing a novel.
And for Marnie, what was the first book or the first, you know, audio project you ever worked on?
You know, this is embarrassing. I did a project with Penguin in 2011, and I cannot remember the name because I didn't do my next book until like 2017. So I just cannot remember. So I'll just say what the first book where I really started attacking and actually making this into a career was called God's Perfect Timing. And it was just a little half-hour, lovely little sweet inspirational book that I enjoyed, and it did really, really well. So that was kind of my launch into this.
It's a good start. There's a question here from Kate who asks, Marnie, how do you come up with different voices? What's been the hardest to voice?
Ooh, always the men. Always the men, especially when you're like, okay, I've got 4. Okay, now I've got 10 men. And I'm like trying to figure out how can I, it just forces you. I'm constantly listening to people on the screen, right? Various actors, hearing the different voices, different dialects, all that stuff. People, especially before pre-COVID, where you're out all the time. I love people watching and just, you know, hearing all the different textures that are happening. And, you know, I also have, you know, there's so many different ways to modify a voice without having to be here or here, you know, like you can find rhythms and different ways to speak with your tongue, doing interesting things. I don't know, there's just a huge variation. And the hardest though I find are the deeper male voices, especially when it says, you know, his voice is deep. Oh, and his voice is deep. Oh, and his voice is deep. And you're like, okay, I'm running out of deep voices here. And I remember one time I made a mistake. I did a voice that I didn't realize was going to hurt my voice, hurt my throat that much. And he was throughout the entire book. So I'd say that was the hardest because that was brutal. And I just had to keep going and just nurture my instrument as much as possible. It was very early on in my career. So I, you know, am forgiving of myself for that. But that was definitely the hardest. It was a very like growly, raspy sound that was very character specific, but was brutal for the instrument.
That's it. And if you've committed to it from the start, then you're
Exactly.
stuck for
You're
the
like,
rest
well,
of
I
the
already
book.
did 5 hours of it. I gotta keep going.
A question from Lauren who asks, Burt, is there any classic thriller that you'd like to rework in your own style?
Well, that's a hard question. I mean, I love, you know, the Dashiell Hammett. I love Ross MacDonald. I love, golly, Raymond Chandler. And I wouldn't dare to rework that in my own child. No is the answer.
A question from Alison who asked, how have you both found adapting to work from home during the pandemic? Are you excited to get back to studios, Marnie? So Marnie, you can start us there.
My life has not, it's funny, you're like pre-pandemic, post, after, during pandemic, and my life looks pretty much the same, except that my children are not in school anymore. But I'm still in the studio by myself for hours at a time in the dark. So it's not that different.
So it looks the same. What about you, Burt? How have you found adapting to work from home?
You know,
I guess writing is quite solitary.
I've always worked at home, but you know, in a funny way, there's fewer distractions in the pandemic. There's fewer interruptions. There's fewer other things. Yeah, I mean, you can't go out to do all the things you normally do. So I found it to be a very productive time to write and to work.
And there is a question here from Becky who says, Marnie, what is your process for working on an audiobook? And is there any audiobook that you would love to work on in future?
Ooh. So I obviously I read the book. And as I'm reading, I'm, you know, either I'm making mental notes. A lot of times it's mental and it's handwritten. I don't do well with the highlighting and the notes and the screen and stuff. I'm very old school with the writing thing. And for some reason, the process of putting pen to paper is very different for me than typing notes in. So yeah, I'm making comments about, you know, circling, highlighting important plot points, important, any notes about dialect, any notes about the sounds, like if the author says, you know, he has a growly, he has a raspy, he has a this, he has a that. As I'm writing too, I'm making summaries of the chapters so that right before I go into that chapter, when I'm recording, I look at that summary and I'm like, okay, I know where this character is headed in this particular chapter, which just gives it another little something that might not be there if I didn't sort of pop that into my head. It's almost like doing a scene and reminding yourself, okay, I'm going for X, this is what's going to happen, here's where it ends up, and now I need to just be in the moment and play this through. Yeah, I forgot what the other question was.
Is there any audiobook that you would love to work on?
Oh gosh, a million books. I would love to do a Shakespeare play. I would really, Shakespeare's I mean, I know everybody says that, it's very cliche, but that's how I feel. I'm one of those people, like, if I could do Shakespeare for years, I'd be incredibly happy. I love it. I love words. I love the feel of words in my mouth and how they change. There's an emotion connected with sound and consonants and vowels, and I know I'm getting nerdy. But,
my background is in English, so you're.
Oh, so there you go. So
you're okay.
Which makes it super important for me, as a performer, to make sure that I really pay attention to exactly what's on the page. So those commas are there for a reason. That punctuation is a roadmap that I have to follow. And if there's ever something, and I'm like, oh, I want to circle that because I want to make sure that is indeed what happens as I play this through.
Burt, do you find that those? Oh, apologies. No, continue.
No, I just realized I did answer it. It's COVID. Right, take your pick. I'll just take a book.
I was just going to ask Burt if the kind of minor details like that are like commas and the way that the page is set up, if those are important for you when you're writing as well.
Oh yeah, I mean they really are. It's the roadmap. I mean, it's how you want things to appear, and you spend a lot of time thinking about them. And even though most people don't even notice it, it really matters.
I
do. And so a question here from Nidhi, who asks, did you both read growing up? Burt, if you'd like to start off.
Yeah, I read a lot. I read all the Nancy Drew mysteries. I read all kinds of mystery books as a kid, and I just loved it. I mean, I've never stopped reading.
Yeah.
And for you, Marnie?
Absolutely. It was funny because when I was younger, I'll tell you this I'll make it as brief as I can. So I wasn't allowed to go into first grade because I wasn't mature enough. So I had to go to this thing called pre-1. So I went from kindergarten to pre-1 to first grade. Now, the thing is, I wouldn't write my name. So they thought I wasn't very bright and I couldn't write my name. And anyway, they gave me a book and I was reading at a third grade level. So I loved reading. And, Sherlock Holmes is one of my favorite characters. And when I discovered him at a very young age, I just absolutely fell in love. And I've enjoyed reading ever since I was small. I mean, it's my favorite thing to do, and I get to do it every day. It's amazing. I'm so lucky.
Kind of on that topic, David asks, when you finish an audiobook, do you say you read a book or listened to it? I'm confused.
Read.
Burt, do you agree?
I was going to say listen, but
oh.
Both are valid. I think both are valid. I think people forget that when you listen, you are in fact reading the book. It just doesn't feel that way because we associate reading with words on a page. But if you look it up,
I mean, I think it's hard to listen to an audiobook and do other things, much like it would be hard to read and do other things, I find personally. So can't decide which camp I'm in, but it's a big debate. A question here from Lisa, who asks, Marnie, would you be willing to narrate a passage for us too? Would love to hear some of the give and take at play.
Sure. I was expecting that. What should I do? Burt, what would you? I could grab my book, Danger in Plain Sight, if you want. I have to go grab it. What would you want me to do?
Anything you want.
Okay, I'll go grab it. You think of what
your direction
you want me to read. I'm running.
It's a shame she doesn't have your setup, Burt, having all of the collection behind you. How often, a personal question would be, do you ever go back and read Do you ever go back and read your own books like that when you just have them in your house when they've been printed and published and sent to you?
Yeah, I mean, I particularly when you haven't read them for a long time. And that's one of the great things about doing an audiobook, is in a way you're rereading your own book. And it's like reading a new book. And that's always a treat.
Okay.
So Marnie, you returned to us with a book.
I
haven't. Yay!
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Burt, what do you want me to do?
You choose. You choose.
Oh, geez. Okay. Oh, gosh. I'm just hopping into this. It's been a little while. Okay, let's see. Okay, Burt, forgive me if I don't get these voices quite right. It's been a little while since I've done this book, and I've probably done about 50 books, I think, since I did this. Okay, we'll go in for it. All right. And there Callie was, crimson spots darkening her cheeks to the color of beet borscht, wanting to scream, but talking instead in that quiet, deliberate, chilly way she had. Terry, how could you do this? How? What were you thinking? Damn it, Terry. She was the only one in the world who could call him Terry. He still wasn't used to it. I didn't do anything to you. You're smuggling into my restaurant, where I live, my home. Cash raised a large, weathered palm, as if gentling a frightened animal. Easy, hey, whoa. No one was hurt. I trusted you. I was hurt.
Hello.
So a clap there from the audience.
It's a little something. It's like you listen to the book. It's better.
It's great to hear the distinction that you can make between, prose and voices. I find that, if you ever read something in your head when you're reading something physically, I feel like it's your own voice played back at you, but hearing it from another voice is great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you're just, becoming the characters just like you would on stage, and there's a narrator who's,
Very true. There is a comment here from Elizabeth who says, hello from Pittsburgh.
Oh.
So there is
You hear that? Who was that?
Oh, there was Elizabeth says, hello from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. Hello, Elizabeth.
There's a question here from Alison who says, Marnie, have you ever lost your voice or found a scene particularly hard to do voice-wise?
Well, yeah, I answered that one, but I will say, oh yeah, I lost a contract actually because of it. It was pretty ugly. I had lost my voice for a good 3 weeks. It was scary. And it's frustrating because this is what I do. And if I can't, it's like, when I worked a corporate job, I didn't have to, yes, to answer the phone, whatever, but really I could still do the job. I just, couldn't talk long and have to email. Anyway, this is like what you have, this is your thing. It's huge. And I remember crying and just being so frustrated by the whole experience. And it's scary. But yeah, it happens. You get sick, you lose your voice, but you recover and we're good. So.
Burt, can you ever imagine being without use of your hand for a period and how difficult that would be? You'd have to dictate writing to someone. What
a nightmare. No, I can't imagine that. That's actually, it's like when a piano player or something like that, they break their hand, you just can't. I need to write on the page. And even though I write a lot on the computer, I always end up writing on the page over it. I'll print something out and make my notes on the page and make all my changes. And without your hand, you can't do that.
That's a very interesting way of working on a book. I've never heard of someone doing that before. That's great.
I can't do it any other way. I literally print out the day before's work and read it and write my notes on it before I go back to it.
And so a question here from Matthew, who asks, do you listen to audiobooks in your spare time? And if so, what narrators do you admire? Marnie, if you'd like to start, and then Burt can tell us.
I should be saying yes all the time. So, I have to admit, not enough. I just don't have the band. Like, I can't fit it in. Being a mom, having my own company, and narrating at night and homeschooling. I wish. When I do, I'm mostly listening to like nonfiction books, so I don't have a specific narrator that comes to mind. I enjoy a lot of the political books like Rage and different things like that. So yeah, full confession, not listening as much as I should.
Burt, do you listen to audiobooks? Do you find, apart from your own, of course?
I only listen to Marnie.
Checks in the mail.
It's a very good plug. There are some comments just on your reading there, Marnie. We have Megan who says, love it. Lisa says that was awesome. And Alison said, amazing. And there's lots of exclamation points across the board there.
Thank you.
So I have a question here from Megan who asks, Marnie, do you have insurance on your voice? I know a surgeon who has insurance on his hands. And I'm wondering if the same goes for you.
Oh, what an interesting question. No, that's fascinating. I don't think I'm famous enough yet for something like that, but I guess you never know. But that's very interesting. And it makes sense as a surgeon, yeah.
Burt, would you ever think of insuring your hands next, just in case?
No, I mean, no is the answer.
And so that brings us to a lot of the end of our audience questions. If there's any last ones that are thrown in. Oh, one more, just so I'm about to wrap you. A question that says, do you have any immediate plans for the future? What are you both working on next?
Burt, go ahead. Yeah, if you.
I'm writing another book, and I'm in the throes of publishing these books, and so that's taking a lot of my time. But in all my spare time, I'm working on a new book, and I'm hoping to finish it, next year.
And what about you, Marnie? Anything in the pipeline?
Yeah, I think I'm booked until August of next year. So the one I'm working on now, called Changes in Chocolates by Heather Long, is a really fun duet narration with Grayson Owens, and hot and steamy and fun, and it's good stuff. I'm enjoying it.
And Burt, a personal question, because your background just reminded me, as in a question from me. When you're working on the cover art for your books, how do you decide on it? I'm just noticing that the cover art is quite consistent, and I'm wondering how you come up with it or how you put it together.
We really spent a lot of time redesigning all the covers of the books, and it's really trial and error. We would try something, and we would draw things, and we would, design things and then send them to the artist, and he would send things back, or she would send things back. And oftentimes we would try, 20, 25 versions before we found what we really liked. And when you find it, you know it. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you really love it and you're done, but not until then.
And there's one last question. This time, I promise, this one flew into me last minute. From Jeff, who asks, how far in advance does Marnie make or record an audiobook before it's released?
Good question. Unfortunately, we were at the mercy of ACX or Blackstone, where it used to take 10 days for things, not with Blackstone, but with ACX, it used to take 10 days, and it can take, now it's about 2.5 months. So you give yourself, it's basically like a 4-week period to sort of get it recorded. Well, you get the first 15 minutes, get your feedback, approval, whatever, move forward, record the book, and then it's got to get engineered, mastered, proofed, etc., get approved. So the whole process can be 2.5 months plus the 3.5 months. It's kind of
longer than even I thought.
Yeah, well, I know, and it's hard to tell our clients that because at one point it was 10 days, and now it's 2.5 months. So
wow.
yeah.
And so quite lastly, where can anybody in the audience find both of you? Burt, where can we find your books and find you, and Marnie, the same to you?
For me, the
Where would
best
you like to go?
thing is to go to my website, which is www.burtweissbourd, BurtWeissbourd.com. And everything is there, including all the audiobooks.
Same.
And for Marnie?
Yeah, it's the same. I'm everywhere though. I really am everywhere.
You'll hear her.
I'm a social media hound. I'm everywhere. It's LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, two pages on Facebook. Anyway, a Twitter. It's www.audiosorceress.com. And there's also, if you just click on my books, it'll go straight to the Audible page and you can see everything I've done, including Burt's books.
Well, listen, thank you both so much for answering my questions and those from the audience. And we really appreciate you coming on tonight, or this afternoon. I know it's not the night time for everybody, where it's this Zoom time zone hopping, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for watching and the questions. That was awesome.
Bye-bye.